the FDA came out and said, okay, we agree. So tirzepatide was banned. It was a holy moment to everybody. Muscle mass is very, very metabolically active tissue. Protecting that muscle mass is priority. I think humans should be cycling their carbs, meaning you have periods where you can have carbohydrates and you have periods where you don't. Eating less carbohydrates, that one's interesting because a ketogenic diet itself is also very, very powerful. Tirzepatide is gone. Tirzepatide is going away. Tirzepatide is finito. Whew. These are some scary words that I think millions of people are waking up and hoping that they don't hear come Thursday, December 19th. This day is right around the corner. It's quite a time to be alive, guys. I mean, seriously, this GLP-1 journey is stressful to say the least. And so what I want to get into with you guys, what I want to talk about is you don't need to be scared. You don't need to be afraid of what's going to happen in 2 days or 1 day or today if you're watching this video today. And if you're watching this video after the fact, this is still going to be very valuable because I'm going to set you up for success regardless of the outcomes regarding tirzepatide. And I'm going to do that because I'm going to lay the foundation for you guys on how exactly you can build some independence from these medications so that you don't become so damn impacted when compounding access gets removed, because this is going to be a game do you really want to live in this constant fear of when are they going to take my meds? When are they going to take my meds? I need my meds. Like, wouldn't it be like so much more cool if it was like, oh man, like these awesome optimizing peptides, well, it's gonna have to go back to working harder. Like, that statement right there is powerful because unfortunately some of you guys think that that's what the medications, that's all they do, right? They just make things easier. There's no easy way out. I've heard on so many lives from so many people, very, very silly people saying very silly things. And this is some of the nonsense they'll spew out because they don't actually understand metabolic health, how it impacts obesity, diabetes for that matter, and many other debilitating conditions. But metabolic health, specifically looking at weight, it's like this, guys. Trying to lose weight without fixing your insulin resistance, fixing your metabolic health, because at its core, that's what metabolic health is referring to, your insulin resistance and your inflammation. Trying to lose weight without GLP-1 medications is like trying to plug a hole in a boat. Actually, let me rephrase that. Losing weight without GLP-1 medications is like trying to throw the water out of the boat to keep the boat afloat when there's a leak without plugging the leak, without plugging the hole. And the greater your metabolic dysfunction, the greater the hole. And so, could sheer willpower compensate for a bigger hole, for a bigger metabolic wreck? Yeah, it can. Could most people do that? No. No, they can't. And so, you got to understand that you know, these medications are the greatest thing that we've ever had for metabolic health, for optimizing health, laying the foundation for weight loss. They're just, you know, my whole deal, especially if you are first time here, is they're just not being used correctly. You know, they're not being used correctly. So people are getting just wrecked by side effects. They're having to deal sometimes, unfortunately, with some complications. And they're not hitting their goals. They're losing a ton of muscle mass. They look like freaking zombies. Literal zombies. And it's just not good, you know? And so I wanted to make this video because I'm going to cover all that. But the access, this is where I want to start, you know? Access to tirzepatide is being taken away. So let's get into the backstory of that so that you guys have some context here and you understand why is access being removed. To understand that, we got to take a step back and just understand the two big players right now and some of the names. Let's cover the nomenclature, and I'll put this really cool blue graphic on the screen so you guys can see. It'll just lay it all out for us. But you got Novo Nordisk and you got Eli Lilly. So Novo Nordisk are the makers of Ozempic and Wegovy. Same thing, the active ingredient is tirzepatide. Eli Lilly is the makers of Mounjaro and Zepbound, active ingredient tirzepatide. We're talking about tirzepatide right now, but make no mistake, tirzepatide gets banned in 2 days, which I think it probably will. Semaglutide's around the corner. And that's why you need to keep watching this video. That's why you need to pay attention now, because are you really going to keep living your life in fear? It's like walking down the street and having to always look over your shoulder because you're not sure when they're going to strike. And what I'm referring to in this analogy, if you can't figure it out, is being so dependent upon larger doses of GLP-1 medications that you can't function without them. Some of you are in that boat where you have to no matter what. That hole in the boat is genetically big. I don't know. Going to my analogy, it's like the boat builder built the boat in a way where that hole is just, you can't fill it in. Okay, fine. But many of you guys have metabolic dysfunction that has little to do with the boat itself and mostly to do with lifestyle. The way you treated the boat, the fact that you let the boat get the hole and you never fixed it last time you went sailing. All right, we got to end this analogy, but you get my point, right? There's genetic-based obesity and there's lifestyle obesity. And, the GLP-1s are amazing, but this is going to happen to tirzepatide. This is going to happen to semaglutide. And the point of this video is so that you understand how you don't have to be so at effect, I want to get you not having to look over your shoulders every freaking day. Okay, so these medications were only available to be sold by compounding pharmacies the way they are because they were put in a national shortage. So we got to understand that also to make sense of all this stuff. So big pharmaceutical industries, they make these medications, and they're spending millions and billions of dollars at times to get through these clinical trials. And so compounding pharmacies can't make, these, they're not allowed to produce even the active ingredient. Remember, semaglutide is the active ingredient. So if anybody tells you compounded semaglutide, only Novo Nordisk can make it, which, by the way, the CEO of Novo Nordisk said this himself, referring to compounded semaglutide. I'm concerned about compounded semaglutide because they are not injecting semaglutide. There's only one semaglutide. And it's like, no. There's only one Ozempic and Wegovy. Semaglutide is semaglutide. It's a compound. All right, let's make that clear. So with compounded semaglutide, you're getting it from a compounding pharmacy, and you're not getting the patented secret sauce process of whatever Novo Nordisk does to semaglutide to pop out Wegovy and Ozempic. Same thing with Eli Lilly referring to Tirzepatide, Mounjaro, Zepbound. Okay, so you guys got the names. The only reason compounding pharmacies can make them is because they are put on a national shortage. Now, I need to be clear that we're not talking about research peptides. Research peptides are just I hope you're just not even messing around with that, to be honest. But that's a whole other conversation for a different video. If it says all over the website, not for human consumption, if it says all over the bottle, not for human consumption, well, I think you're able to figure that one out. But if we're talking about stuff that comes from a 503A, 503B, which is a nice stamp of designation. These are FDA regulated, state compounding pharmacy board regulated as well. High quality producing pharmacies. And so you're getting safe and efficacious stuff. You know, there's always some bad actors, but this is you essentially like a stamp of approval quality wise. But the national shortage is the reason why these medications were able to be produced by compounding pharmacies to begin with. And this is a big deal because price-wise, if you didn't already know this, getting the same dose of semaglutide from a compounding pharmacy versus Ozempic or Wegovy, it's like 4 times cheaper. And with Mounjaro Zepbound, it's like 5 times almost, depending on the dosage. And so this is just like unaffordable for most people. Most people cannot afford $1,000 to $1,500. A lot of people can't even afford the compounded couple $100 a month, let alone, you know, $1,000 to $1,500. I mean, that's just insane. And you know, they spent the millions and millions and millions of dollars to do the research, and so they need to make their money back. I'm not against that. The fact that medications are that expensive is just a whole nother conversation entirely that I don't have time right now to get into this. It's just not the right video. But so you understand the backstory now. You understand a little bit of the naming, the reason why medications were even available for affordability, were made affordable was because of this shortage. So what happened way back in November was the medications were, the FDA is the one, by the way, that makes the jurisdiction on the designation here of whether the shortage is in place or not or over. That's the FDA, and that's their wheelhouse. And so, of course, the pharmacies are going to say, yeah, we're good. You know, FDA, they're knocking on the FDA's door. You need to enforce this shortage over. You know, you need to enforce this shortage being over, and we can supply, you know, all people across the globe, which is just bullshit. I mean, how many of you guys watching this struggled to get medications in the past couple months? So we know that's bullshit, and we know which financial interests obviously drive their motivation to say otherwise. But the FDA came out and said, okay, we agree. So Tirzepatide was banned. It was a holy shit moment to everybody. And what happened was, and this is just all good information for you to understand a little bit of what happened, but then a group of compounding pharmacies, I want to say Alliance group, like the group's called Alliance, but don't quote me on that. Some big compounding pharmacies got together and they sued the FDA. And so in reaction to this lawsuit, now we're into like late November, the FDA goes, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and rescind our decision to enforce the shortage, therefore cutting supply off to pharmacies and clinics. And we're going to let you guys know on December 19th. I know, right? So the timing of you watching this video, I'm going to try to get this posted today as I'm filming this the 17th, midday. Actually on my way to get an adjustment right now. But so that's the whole situation. And so, but that's not the only thing, right? Novo Nordisk, they're trying to do a different thing. They're going to keep tugging at the shortage, right? To get compounding access restricted. But I see them trying to make light of health complications and health risks and potential deaths that have happened from semaglutide. I mean, they already came out. The CEO, what is it, Jorgensen? I don't remember his name. There's a Jorgensen in there. I made a TikTok video about this that went viral because he went out and basically made that statement. And if you actually go to the FDA website, the registry for where these medication reactions are reported, although it's horribly inaccurate because it's not required. It's only reported when somebody feels like reporting it. Nonetheless, there's way more reports of Ozempic than there are compounded semaglutide. Significantly more, but he left that out in his statements, which is fascinating to me. Fascinating, not implying that there wasn't strategy behind that, how that went down. Just want to make that clear. But anyways, so we'll see. But look, you've made it this far into the video because you want to not be so at the mercy of these outcomes and what happens, right? And so truthfully, the best thing you can do is build some of that GLP-1 independence. How do you do that? Well, there's many categories, right? Diabetics are a different category. We're talking about weight loss. And we have everything from full-blown morbid obesity with major metabolic dysfunction, all the way down to very little at all, and just extra body fat in the body, but metabolic function is actually really good. The person's barely starting to become insulin sensitive. So I happen to think that most weight gain starts with development of insulin resistance, although a healthy individual can massively start eating in a surplus and start gaining weight really fast, and they would gain weight faster than they would develop insulin resistance. So sure, if you can catch somebody in that situation where they're still sensitive and they just gain the weight, yeah, great. Most of you, that's not the case. Most of you have been overweight for a while. Most of you, it's been a slow, gradual 5-10 pounds a year kind of process as you set into obesity or on your way to obesity or on your way to prediabetes or already at prediabetes. And so this has been primarily due to the slow and progressive nature of insulin resistance itself. So we have to understand that. And I have plenty of other videos if you guys want to take a deep dive into insulin resistance, which I totally encourage you to do so that you understand. But I'll give you guys a briefie, if I could say the word. Can I say briefie? Well, I said it. Hopefully you guys know what I meant with that. But briefie, a brief little explanation of insulin resistance. So let's go back to that analogy, right? Like that boat. I think that's a really good one. So you got a hole in a boat, and the boat is, a lot of water is flooding into the boat, and that boat's going to sink. Sinking would be death to obesity. I don't know, that's kind of extreme in this analogy, but sinking would be you lost the battle, which you never lose the battle, I guess, right? Until you die. But anyways, so failing, right, would be sinking, and the bigger the hole, the bigger the problem. Well, if there's no hole, and somehow a massive amount of water got into the boat, all right, you got to get the boat out. You gained a bunch of fat. You ate in excess. You got to get the water out, right? Or you could sink if somehow water came into a boat. That'd be like a crazy flood over the boat. I don't know. But most people, like I said, are gaining weight with some metabolic dysfunction. There's some sort of leak. But if you don't recognize the leak, then every time you lose weight, this is why it just keeps coming back. And that propensity for regaining weight can really be understood from this analogy here. And the greater the insulin resistance and inflammation, which I'm saying is a quick summation and understanding of metabolic health, the bigger the hole gets, the greater the dysfunction gets, the greater the leak gets, the more challenging it becomes to achieve lasting weight loss, achieve weight loss at all, the greater the amount of mental and physical effort that it would take to get the job done. right? Because water's coming in at a faster rate. So that's a good understanding of like the pathophysiology, the progression, the nature of insulin resistance. What it actually is your body's decreased responsiveness to insulin that develops. And why it develops is we're going to save that for a separate video. Basically, lifestyle is a big category. Things that drive up your blood sugar will drive up insulin, will drive up insulin levels, and insulin levels over time, repeated exposure, develops the resistance, among many other things like toxicity, cortisol, sleep deprivation, stress, genetics. But as you become resistant to insulin, remember, insulin's job is to get the sugar out of your blood into the cells, into the body. Its job is also to get the nutrients out of the blood and into the cells too as well, by the way. So insulin's job is to shuttle that nutrients. It's a storage hormone. And boy, oh boy, does it store. Like, it is very powerful at storing. And so you got this signal to store. And what insulin resistance inevitably leads to is this hyperinsulinemia. This chronically elevated insulin levels over time, right? So it's very progressive in nature, and it perpetuates, it drives, it gets worse and worse over time. So insulin sensitivity is the opposite of insulin resistance. So it's important you understand that, because sometimes people will use insulin sensitivity or they'll use resistance. We're talking about the same thing, just different sides of the scale. As you are more insulin sensitive, you are less resistant, and as you are more resistant, you are less insulin sensitive, right? So the goal is to become insulin sensitive again. You were all, well, I shouldn't say that anymore, because now humans are being born with endocrine disrupting chemicals and some metabolic dysfunction already, which is insane. That's a whole other conversation. But for the sake of simplicity, most of you were very metabolically sound, very insulin sensitive. You ate like crap all the time, right? Think about the standard American diet that we've all grown up with, and the food pyramid, and carbs, and sugar, and all this crap. So we spiked our blood sugar all the time. We spiked our insulin levels over time. But as you can see over this graph here, the spikes are very thin, right? Insulin is low when you're not eating, and then you eat and the insulin spikes high, but it also decreases very rapidly. And then as you become more resistant, now the baseline insulin is higher. Now it takes longer for the change. You rise, get the job done, get the blood sugar down, and now it takes longer for the blood sugar to get back down. Thicker, what's the part of that graph? Cut this part out. Thicker peak. So thicker peak and thinner valleys in the graph, right? The valleys were the periods where insulin levels are low, and then finally you become insulin resistant. There's just no valleys anymore. Okay. So insulin levels over a 24-hour period start becoming more and more chronically elevated, which means you have this powerful storage signal happening all the time. And when you think about the symptoms of insulin resistance, many of you guys can relate. You're living this right now as you speak, as I speak. Maybe you're speaking. You wake up with no energy. You're brain foggy. You have all this fat on your body and you can't even tap into the energy. You probably wondered why that is. You're lethargic, your body's always hungry. Eat. Well, if you're trying to store a bunch of anything, right? If you're constantly storing, constantly growing, I'm not going to have you energetic, burning calories, and I'm going to keep you hungry. I need more fuel to keep growing. This abnormal growth pattern is driven by insulin. Because remember, the healthy individual, even when they're eating like crap, before they become metabolically unhealthy, they can tolerate those glucose spikes. They can tolerate the insulin levels and bring it back down, because we're very sensitive to insulin. So it's really, really important you understand that. Because now we talk about GLP-1 medications. GLP-1 medications are the first class of medications we've ever had that get to the root cause of insulin resistance. They literally get to the root cause issue of metabolic health. They also reduce inflammation. So they make you more insulin sensitive, and they reduce inflammation, which creates the decrease in the food chatter. So now we have a person who's eating less, so they're in the caloric deficit, and their metabolism and metabolic health is working with them, not against them. And they can really get into some weight loss. Amazing, amazing compounds. But, and again, different people starting off with low metabolic health issues to high metabolic health issues, small holes in the boat, large holes in the boat. Like, you have two ways to plug up the boat: GLP-1 medications and lifestyle. Holy crap, you mean there's more things I can do than just the GLP-1 to improve my insulin resistance? Holy crap, I never knew that. Now, as sarcastic as I was attempting to as much sarcasm as I was attempting to convey there, sadly, this is the case, because there's not a lot of education on metabolic health to doctors, compounded by the fact that most doctors are struggling. Even if they do understand this concept, they don't get paid to coach. They get paid to write prescriptions, baby. It's like it's just a line. It's a business. They have to see X amount of people every hour in order to make ends meet, because reimbursements are dropping. And don't get me started on the whole health insurance issue. You guys all saw what happened. I actually made some videos reading Luigi Mangione's manifesto and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's insane. So that whole system is fucked. And so the pillars that I like to think of, I call them. So, and by the way, what I've created is the FLOA protocol, FLOA, fasting like our ancestors. So my whole approach towards using GLP-1 medications, because I work with my providers, they do the prescriptions. They are the ones that do the prescriptions for the peptides, the GLP-1s, and I do the coaching. I've coached thousands of people at this point. And so it never ceases to amaze me what I see. But fasting is one of the 10 pillars. And there are absolutely 10 pillars of lasting weight loss. I want to briefly go through these pillars so that you understand kind of a little bit about each one. So, eating less processed foods, eating less carbohydrates, lots of fasting, lifting heavy weights, a good supplement protocol, reducing your inflammation, balancing your hormones, optimizing your sleep, handling your stress, and mindset. These are the 10 pillars. I know that's a lot, and we're barely just going to touch on some of the main ones here in this video, and each of you guys have your own categories that need more work. What I'm here to tell you is that most humans benefit from focusing on these 10 pillars and improving them. And for some of you, it'll be a complete life transformative event for dialing in the one or many categories that you're lacking of. So eating less processed foods. Nobody's arguing about processed foods, ultra processed foods. Now, the discussion of how we should eat is a very interesting one. Myself, I am currently evolving. As I speak, I am in a modified carnivore diet for the first time in my life. And I feel fucking fantastic so far. I'm not shocked, by the way. I'm very insulin sensitive, so I don't need to do full-blown just meat, but I'm very much aligned with Paul Salandino. I've been following his journey, and I 100% agree with his approach towards carnivore, and I would recommend carnivore for somebody who, full-blown carnivore, no fruits, if you were fully insulin resistant and of poor metabolic health, if you had the mindset of tackling carnivore. That's always been my reason why I kind of avoided it, because looking to help people, I just felt like, what's the point of trying to implement a tool that most people couldn't use? So I'm doing it for myself, and we'll see what happens. Probably what's going to happen is I'm going to say, hey guys, carnivore is amazing, and I'll help you with it if you want to do it, But we've had great success with that without people doing carnivore, which is my point. So eating less processed foods, however you do it, that's, I think, pretty straightforward thing. Eating less carbohydrates, that one's interesting, because a ketogenic diet itself is also very, very powerful. But also, like carnivore, pretty challenging to sustain. Pretty difficult to sustain a ketogenic diet. But transformative. There's some new literature, if you guys haven't seen, that came out, freaking cancer. And I've known this. I've always told any of my loved ones that if you have cancer, a ketogenic diet is probably the way to go. But neurological issues too, like, we know this is well established. So I think humans should be cycling their carbs, meaning you have periods where you can have carbohydrates and you have periods where you don't. And I'm a big fan of lifting heavy weights, progressive muscle building programs centered around the days when you eat your carbohydrates. Again, more related to how metabolically dysfunctional you are. You could have carbs every day if you wanted to. But then your body fat percentage won't be as low as it could be if you cycled your carbohydrates. So, two things to kind of consider there. And then the fasting. This is the, oh my gosh, this is the magic. This is my bread and butter, no pun intended. Lots of butter, no bread. It's going to be interesting when I get to week 6 of carnivore. This is week 2 and I love it. And so far I have no aversion to eating meat every day. It's actually been kind of crazy eating so many eggs. Not that I avoided eggs before, but I certainly minimized calories, right? I was conscious of my calories. So now I'm just eating as much meat as I want to fullness. And anyways, that whole thing, it'll be interesting. No disdain towards meat at all. I'm like excited to eat dinner now, which is funny. I guess I was always excited to eat. Anyways, so with the fasting, with FLOA, we get our patients into weekly long rounds of fasting. 48 hours is the goal for most people. Of course, we have medical providers, guys. Always consult medical providers and physicians when you are embarking on any sort of new lifestyle change, especially long fasting, FLOA fasting. But what I did was I created structure where structure was missing in the world of prolonged fasting. There was just not enough cohesion and structure here. And it was very much like, okay, 24, 36, 48, how often? And nobody put together a weekly long kind of fasting protocol until me. And having done it on thousands of patients now that can attest to the success, it's like optimizing your metabolic health on steroids. In fact, out of all the tools I have, the 2 most powerful tools I have are GLP-1s and prolonged fasting. But the thing about prolonged fasting is the GLP-1s make it easier to get into the prolonged fast. And we're talking about the weekly completion of a 48-hour. Without the GLP-1s, because the food chatter and suppression is not there. It's challenging for most people to get into it. And so I would recommend the GLP-1, honestly, as the best tool that we have right now. But, and then you know, these first three things I'm talking about are all just really, really important, you know. Without a doubt, you get into this rhythm and you are fixing insulin resistance. Now, of course, I told you guys there are other drivers of insulin resistance. This is not going to fix a cortisol induced insulin resistance. This is not going to fix and override an inflammation driven insulin resistance. This is not going to fix and override a genetic based, which I think probably exists. This is not going to fix a toxicity driven insulin resistance. But I think this will fix everything else, because everything else is lifestyle. The things that you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, and the things that you're not doing that you should be doing, that both of which drive blood glucose levels down, which will drive insulin levels down. And when you think about all the different ways to not spike your blood sugar levels up, ketogenic is one of them, and fasting. And what's the longest form of fasting? Prolonged fasting. And what's the most structured prolonged fasting regimen? The FLOA protocol. And how cool is it to do it with other people? To be part of a community, like, which is what we have. We have thousands of people in our community, and it's amazing. So you get context, you get support, guidance from successful people. And finally, guys, before I end off, you can catch, I have other videos where I get into the 10 pillars of lasting weight loss, just so you know. Definitely check those out for a deeper dive. But finally, resistance training. You have a ton of muscle mass on your body for being overweight. Most of you. Some of you don't, because that's part of your problem as well, as you have all the fat and no muscle. But you have more than you realize, is a fair statement. And so going into the weight loss program with the goal of protecting the muscle mass is insanely important, because muscle mass is very, very metabolically active tissue. And so you want to protect the muscle mass that you have on your body, without a doubt. Protecting that muscle mass is priority, and you do that by adhering to a higher protein intake, about 1 gram per target body weight, up to 1 gram per pound of body weight. I'm okay with that. And then a solid 3-day, at least, solid resistance training program where you focus on compound movements. I have other videos where I talk about this. Hypertrophy training, guys, is where it's at. I just got to my adjustment, so keep it locked and loaded, guys. Let's cross our fingers either way. If you made it this far, I got you covered. If you liked this video, check this one out over here. This will give you a deeper dive about what the FLOA protocol is all about. We'll see you guys later.
There's nothing worse than seeing a patient just like you starting these GLP-1 medications and end up short of your weight loss goals. How much better would you feel about your journey if you are consistently making progress the entire time, and more importantly, saving a ton of money by not needing as much of the GLP-1 medications? I have the answer for you to achieve lasting weight loss and save money on your GLP-1s in the long run.